So in this video, I'm going to talk about the three main stages of spiritual awakening. And I'm relating it to a butterfly because I believe that the butterfly is such a perfect and beautiful symbol of transformation and metamorphosis. I'm going to really emphasize the second stage because I believe that if you're watching this video and you found this is probably where you're at or really close to. And this is probably the longest stage that we go through when we're in our spiritual journey. But as we know, the first stage of becoming a butterfly is the caterpillar stage after, of course, birth. And the caterpillar stage it's not bad, wrong, or anything. It's perfect. It's a beautiful stage of our existence. It's what we came here to be. As a divine spiritual being, we wanted to embody limitation. We wanted to embody the experience of separateness. We wanted to feel incompleteness because as this divine, unlimited, omnipotent, eternal being, we don't have life or death or limitation because we're complete. So we incarnate into these human vessels, and automatically from the moment we come out into the world, there's this automatic sense of air and separation. We take our first breath and we all of a sudden feel isolated and separate of our mom from the womb, from the moment we take our first breath. And from there on out, we are experiencing this world against us. All of a sudden, it's a sense of survival. We need the milk, we need warmth, we need care. And from that point on, we are looking to survive. And then as we grow a little older, not only are we physically trying to survive, but then we're emotionally trying to survive. So then we relate to people and we're trying to figure out who we are in relationship to another. We go to school and we start building relationships. We find that some people push us, other people befriend us, and on it goes where we're trying to understand me against the world. And then as we get a little bit older, we start to think me against nature, and who am I against, the beginnings and understandings of the world. We start looking spiritually. We might be like 5 or 6 and start asking, where did the world come from? How did this all originate? What's the meaning of all this? So we ask like simple. We don't usually get so existential at 5 or 6, though some of us do, and that leads us earlier but on the spiritual journey. But for a lot of us, we're just still testing out, who am I against? Me and this plant, me and this, me and the dog. And you're consumed with me. How do I take care of me? And then you get older and you go through the teens and you start figuring out, who am I sexually? What are my interests? Where do I fit into everything? And then on it goes. You're an adult and you're trying to figure out, what do I want to do for work? How do I make money? How do I survive? And then it's like, how do I become the big shot? How do I mean something and matter and have purpose and have fulfillment? And all of this is based on the rooted feeling of survival. You feel separate, you feel lack, you feel like something's missing, and inevitably you're gonna die. So you're looking to hoard as much as you can and get as much purpose, meaning, pleasure, fun, and all the goodness out of life before you croak. Same with the caterpillar. The caterpillar eats and eats and eats, constantly trying to build its weight, and then it sheds its skin, and then it eats and eats and eats, and it sheds its skin, and it's constantly building energy because in its DNA, in its deepest psyche, it's already coded to go through a metamorphosis. Whether it knows it consciously or not, it's coded that it is going to become a butterfly. Now, not all caterpillars make it to a butterfly, as we know. Same with our human beings. Not everyone makes it to enlightenment in this incarnation, but we're all coded to enlighten because we're all coded to know ourselves as God, because we are all God itself. We are all the divinity itself. And so we are coded to know this. But we don't always get it the first round. Sometimes we take multiple incarnations to figure this out, but the coding and the instinct and the intuition is always within us. And so like a caterpillar, the caterpillar is working to eat and stuff itself and fill up and get as much energy, because on the deepest level, it knows it is about to leave its pack and leave the garden and go separate itself to go through the wildest and most incredible transformation. And so we do the same thing. We're trying to pack in a good life. We're trying to do all the things to survive and then make some beautiful meaning and purpose out of it. And, you know, we're trying to find us versus them. And I'm thinking about, you know, how a lot of people are looking for status, celebrityism, influence. They're trying to be king of the hill in some sort of way. The best parent, the best boss, be the best entrepreneur, exceed these goals and just be the best human being. And so that's level one, is trying to really survive and then make some meaning out of just a human existence. But then a lot of us realize that's not enough. Usually a crisis hits, something happens, there's a great loss, we see other people dying, we see other people hurt, or we get a diagnosis, or we get a job loss, or we start finding that there's not as much meaning in the material things that we have been chasing after. And so we start looking inward. All of a sudden, the world's not enough. Just like the caterpillar, it's been eating and hanging out and probably in a little bit of competition with the other caterpillars, trying to get the best part of the garden. And all of a sudden it realizes, wait, this isn't enough. Like, I'm coded to want more, and there's something naturally occurring in me. And this is true of all of us, but when it's divinely timed, we will all start to go separate ourselves from people, and we start noticing, wait, I thought I really wanted to make $1 million and up level my business and do all this stuff, but now I've got this diagnosis, or now something occurred, now I'm going through a divorce, now something's happened, or maybe it's just wait, this just isn't fulfilling me the way I thought. So you start going inward, you start wanting to read books, you start looking maybe into psychology, or you start wanting to understand yourself, or somebody says something about your astrology sign, you're like, whoa, that makes sense. I never was that into all that, but now that's starting to make sense. There's some mystery going on. So you find yourself starting to leave the garden and starting to kind of leave the pack, and you're starting to find yourself searching online, going to bookstores, going to the library, reading Wikipedia, doing all these things, going on YouTube, searching for videos. And all of a sudden you start noticing, wait, there's just things that seem to be occurring. My Sunday school teacher once told me that, or, I remember that about myself, or, you just start thinking differently, and you're like, whoa, I was never into Hinduism, but all of a sudden, that guy at work said something that's starting to make sense that I just never saw myself interested in before, but now it's hitting home with me. And so you find yourself starting to leave the familiar. All of a sudden, the survival of the body starts to be a different feeling. You might be trying to survive the body, or all of a sudden you're like, wait, I'm not trying to survive. Now I'm trying to understand the meaning behind all of this. And so whatever it is, whatever propels you, whatever occurs, you start noticing yourself naturally drawn up. Now the caterpillar, it's physical, but for most of us, it's spiritual. We start going inward. We're starting to find ourselves. Now sometimes it's in one moment. It can be through a psychedelic trip. It could be through a spiritual retreat. It could be just through a moment of awakening. It could be at a prayer circle. It could be at a festival. It could be just sitting on your bed reading something, but all of a sudden or maybe it's gradual, but for me it was a set, all of a sudden one night. There was a very big difference between Candace one day and Candace the next day. But for me it was a psychedelic journey, and it was very unexpected. Though I was doing the spiritual work, I was doing all the things, starting to pull away from the familiar life that I was used to living, and what mattered wasn't mattering, and I was reading spiritual books. But for a lot of us, it's this like moment where all of a sudden we're in the cocoon. All of a sudden there's a metaphysical shift. And what happens is, it's not like the world changes, but the world changes. All of a sudden it goes from me feeling like there's this huge world that I'm just this one small brick in the wall, and this giant ass world out here, billions of people, and it's me against them, and me figuring it out, me trying to beat death and get as much in, to now every little thing about my life is pointing me in. Now you're metaphysically in the cocoon. You start connecting the dots. All of a sudden you're like, wait, that song, those numbers, that thing that he said. All of a sudden I realize I'm not just accidentally living in the town that I'm in. This is purposeful. Wait, my friends needed to move so that I could do this work. Wait, that makes sense why that happened now. Oh, that car accident wasn't a mistake after all. There was something I'm connecting dots on. Oh, I don't have muscle pain for no reason. This is actually an emotional pain. All of a sudden what happens when you go into the metaphysical cocoon is it's the house of mirrors. The world all of a sudden is holding you in, and everything is mirroring and reflecting. All of a sudden everything is a symbol to you. You realize that everyone that comes into your space, whether it's a moment, a lifetime, or somewhere in between, is basically a messenger. And the closer they are and the more they have influence in your life, the stronger the message probably is for you. And so all of a sudden you're like, oh, that person is now helping me understand myself at a different level. I thought I was a victim to them when I was in the caterpillar stage. I felt like I was a victim to the world. I felt like I could get hurt and I was vulnerable. Now all of a sudden I'm realizing, what's our connection now? Maybe I see something in them that I don't like about myself. Maybe they're teaching me more love and compassion. Maybe they're helping me overcome my victimhood or my sense of needing to control, or they're reflecting my insecurity. Maybe I've harbored jealousy over that person. I wanted to be like them in some way, and now all of a sudden I'm realizing, wait, I'm good enough. I'm lovable. I can have a beautiful life. Or maybe you start realizing and learning manifestation. You're like, oh, I'm divine. Oh, you mean I can create my life how I want? So then you start intention setting, and you start thinking about the things you want for your life. And so you start learning about manifestation, and you start working with the divine, and you start seeking inward and thinking, wait, life isn't just about survival. Life is actually this like dreamy thing. So the cocoon is this very introspective, very intuitive, very beautiful, incredible, magical, wondrous place. But it's also chaotic. It's also destructive. It also can bring about some of your worst nightmares. This is also where, and this goes in no order, because the cocoon is this like, it's like a sphere almost. And so nothing is linear, and whatever happens in there, it can go in any order. It goes in different orders for all of us. So the cocoon is just self-containing. It's a metaphysical container where all of a sudden everything's mirroring, and you start waking up to your divinity, and you start finding symbols and meaning and purpose, and you start understanding a greater capacity of your being. but you might also encounter the dark night of the soul, major collapse, major destruction. You might go into the darkest and hardest parts of your life and you're like, wait, I'm doing all spiritual work, I'm super positive, I'm happy, I'm like all of a sudden feeling this like new lease on life, and my world's collapsing. Well, that's what happens with the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. It becomes soup, it goes black, it goes dark, and the being almost dies. There's just barely a heartbeat and breath. There's just some eyes and maybe antennas that remains, but everything else is just getting stirred up like a vacuum in there. And the same goes for us. When we're in this place, everything starts breaking down. We're experiencing the highest highs and the lowest lows. And it can go in any old fashion. And one year you might be up and you might be manifesting the love of your life, and the next moment your business collapse. You might get the worst diagnosis with your health, and then all of a sudden you're getting an offer to move to Bali. Like, it is just this like very mystical and supernatural experience that you both are learning to control and not control. It's a very paradoxical realm and experience where you learn your power, but then you learn surrender. You learn to flow, but then you also learn to just let things be. It's very hard to put words on it because it's without reach, it's without grasp. It's so supernatural in there, and everyone's experience is different. I find personally from my own experience and by watching friends and watching other people's experiences, this is where there's more self-realization than ever going on. You're realizing your divinity, your sexuality, who you want to be. You know, when you first go in the cocoon, you're like, oh, I'm really interested in this. I really want to be this artist. Now I'm going into yoga, and then you're just trying on all these different parts of your character, your interests, what you're into. And then what I find is on the later stage of the cocooning, you almost have to dissolve all those things that you thought you were. It becomes this total surrender and dissolve once you get past some of the darker spots. But I want to talk about the darker first. So what I find, and this is not a rule, but this is what I've noticed about most people. The cocooning period often starts out very magical. You've entered a new realm, and again, not to repeat myself a bunch, but you go into this awakening where everything's magical, and you start noticing that all the symbols of life and everything is this awakening in this house of mirrors. Everything's trying to wake you up and show you the beauty of life. All of a sudden you're noticing the birds. Maybe you tried psychedelics and you're starting to see more details. Everything becomes more sensual for you. And so it's this beautiful euphoric stage for a lot of us when we first enter the cocoon. And then later, as we go deeper and deeper, we go into a tunnel where it gets darker, and that's when the dark night of the soul, or we go into the void, or however you want to call it. You know, there can be a lot of opposition, but you're now so deep into it that there's absolutely no way you could be that caterpillar. Like, you're so far from it now. You've been totally muddled down. You're stew, and now you are just completely pulp, just at your very essence as a spirit. And for a lot of people, it's even hard to go to work. A lot of people experience this through the quarantine, you know, where we were just at our wits' end, just barely able to get up some days. You just feel broken, and sometimes this is where your greatest fears are highlighted. You're looking face to face with your fear of survival, the fear of death, your fear against being hated or ignored or lied to or taken advantage of. You're at your greatest fear of actually thinking that God could dislike you, and you're up against it. And sometimes you're not even consciously aware that's what's happening. But I'm here to tell you that's what's happening. You're up against this threat that you could be doomed to hell. You think you're in hell, and yet you're in the cocoon because it's so dreary and dark, and you're dealing with lawsuits, or you're dealing with cancer, you're dealing with bankruptcy, or you're dealing with a horrendous divorce, or you're dealing with these outer things. Remember, it's a house of mirrors. It's mirroring something on the inside. So what appears to be this outer situation, and you're now in the cocoon, so it's actually mirroring your most haunted fears. It's now a haunted house, bringing everything to light. You're having this family turmoil, and it's all getting brought to the surface. It's all coming out for you as the spirit to look at and to transform. And so you want to welcome it instead of resisting it, because that'll just keep you in it longer. The more you resist and say, no, I don't want this, it becomes samsara. You just keep repeating it. And you could stay in this cocoon for a long time. And I think there's a possibility people stay in the cocoon and die in the cocoon. We know caterpillars die in the cocoon and never see the light of being a butterfly. So it is possible that a lot of us stay in the cocoon and then have to go through the cycle again the next time. And then, we again, we're coded to awaken. We are coded to enlighten, to see the whole journey through. It's coded. And we've got all of eternity to do this, so there's no rush. But everyone will get through this in their own divine time. But there are things that we can teach to help further that journey along. And so saying yes to the dark night of the soul, those awful, turbulent, disasters that you're going through, are the greatest thing that could occur inside that cocoon. Welcome it. Welcome poverty. Welcome the humiliation. Welcome the perceived self you thought you were to just be demolished. You don't want to be a caterpillar anymore. You're ready to end that life. That life was suffering. That life was duality. That life was constant threat of survival. You were constantly having to eat more, work harder, do stuff, get approval, be liked, say the right thing. You were constantly having to work. No matter how beautiful your life was, you were trying so hard to survive as a caterpillar. And so let the self and the ego, this is the ego break. Let the perceived self break down. You're breaking down in this cocoon. And so this is what has to occur in order to start building those wings, in order to start seeing the wondrous and most beautiful things occur. So inside of that, as you're breaking down, you're going through the hardest parts of the cocoon, you're actually getting to the really, really good stuff. So welcome it, take your time with it, don't rush it, it'll all work itself out. I promise you, when you feel so dark and alone in this place, you're actually more understood and received, and you're loved, and you're not denied. God is not denying you. God is helping you get through an ego transformation. So this is a very deliberate place, and you're not alone in this. So the rebuilding phase is quite beautiful. So I also want to say that the tower in the tarot deck is the dark night of the soul. It's the breaking point. And on the other side of it's the star. The light starts to peer in. And this is when you've been broken down and when you are starting to get glimpses of enlightenment. This is when you start understanding you don't need to desire the things that you thought you need to desire. You don't need to work so hard at life. This is when you start surrendering your ego's will for the divine will. This is when you start realizing that you don't really need to ask or pray or manifest, because it's all been coded and given. It's already destined for you. You learned all that stuff on the earlier side of the cocoon, and now you're coming to realize you can just let everything be. This is when you start calming down. This is when you start going a little slower. This is when you start recognizing that life is actually really and truly moving with and for you. This is the other side where you start recognizing even more oneness. The world as a caterpillar felt so big, all of a sudden it's starting to feel very small, and it's starting to feel like this even more orchestrated story that is centered around you, the divine you. You see it more and more, and every day you're waking up to even more synchronicity and divinity, and you realize you are just guided moment to moment to moment to moment. And this is when the cocoon starts to get very tight. Your wings are starting to peer out, and all of a sudden you're realizing, like, oh, I am now God. I am. Now there's a resemblance of who I used to be, but I am. This is often when people become monks, teachers. This is when they go on to, some people go live on the mountain. Some people end up teaching. Some people end up living very quiet lives. Some people are artists. But usually where they land in this is very different to where they were as a caterpillar, even in the cocoon stage. They're guided, and there's a very big difference felt. Maybe not seen, maybe they look the same. Some people do, and some people don't. Some people physically look different. Some people shave their heads. Some people relocate around the world. But whatever it is, they're guided, and their ego is not at the driver's seat. They become Buddhas. They become Christ. They become the consciousness and the full awareness of the divine. They're self-realized. And so they live in this state of nowness, oneness. There's just pure love emanating. They live from their heart center. There's no more desire. There's nothing to want. They're no more in survival. They're now living from a state of stillness in the mind. Their body might be doing stuff, but they're very still. There's just presence. It's really beautiful to meet people in this place. You feel so seen, so loved, so understood, so accepted. They see past the body and they see right into the soul because they see themselves. They see the oneness. So to meet a butterfly person is so beautiful. But that is what we are all destined to be. We are all coded for this. We are all coded to be a guru, to be enlightened, to be awakened, to know ourselves as God. It's within all of us. And wherever we are in this process is perfect, and it cannot be sped up. It will go however it goes. But if you feel the hunger and the yearning, then start allowing what is. All you have to do is be with what is, because it's the resistance of it that slows it down. When we say, no, I really don't like the fact that things are falling apart, and I'm going to try to hold it up, and I'm going to try to survive it, then you're resisting it. Then you're just going to keep that cycle going until you say yes to it and allow the ego to be dropped, to be transformed, to go through a metamorphosis, to realize that it is actually God. And so the way through this is the way through it. And we can't speed it up, but there is a beautiful divine plan. And if you are watching this, you are probably in the cocoon or somewhere near the cocoon and ready for this. The cocoon stage for me has been over 10 years. It's been a long process, and there was a very audible moment, very tangible moment that I had between going in. There was a lot of preparation. There was actually a few years of preparation before I really felt I was in this metaphysical, confined place. And when I didn't know, but I did know, but when I was going through it, I surrendered. I was so ready to get in there. And it was all the things. It was both the most glorious, euphoric, felt so supernatural and so special and so beautiful, but it also costed me the life I had, the Candace I thought I was. There was a divorce. There was a lot of ups and downs, a lot of give and take. There was a lot of miracles. There's a lot that's occurred in that 10 years of shifting, a lot of self-realization, a lot of trying on different counterparts and ideals, all of which has just pushed me to realize that I am not any of that. I am God. I am the essence and light of God, the divine itself. But there was a lot of ego death that had to occur, and there was a lot of beauty and a lot of fun in it. And it went the way it went, and I couldn't see the next step. And I didn't want to, and I still can't. But this journey is exactly what we came for. And so it's not anything to skip over and try to jump through any part of it. It's a precious, precious journey. And so wherever you are, welcome it. And hang in there for those dark nights, those dark seasons. There was a few dark seasons within the cocoon, and they all make sense on the other side. But just welcome them, because they are a very precious part of the transformation and rebuilding those wings. And those are sacred moments. I hope this helped. I'd love to hear in the comments where you're at in your journey and what it's been like for you. And so if you'd like to share, I'd love to hear more, because I'm going to continue to talk about this and probably expand on it. And so stay in tune, follow me for more, because I'm going to be really expanding on this even more. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Blessings.